Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter and analyst for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. The San Antonio Spurs evened up the Western Conference Finals at 2 games apiece, winning Game 4 103-82. It was one of the best defensive performances I've seen this postseason. They held OKC to a season low 82 points, also tying a season low in just 6 3-pointers made and a season worst 18.1 3-point percentage. A dominant defensive effort from the Spurs. They needed every stop to tie this thing up, and now we are headed back to OKC, where it is essentially a best of 3 with 2 of those games in OKC. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Happy Memorial Day weekend for everybody. Want to talk through the game for a little bit. With it being a blowout, I don't think there's too much to discuss, but I think there's some stuff that was interesting schematically and some of the adjustments that San Antonio made. But outside of that, we'll just get into the Q&A as per usual. So let's get into it. The Spurs had lost the last couple of games, and it felt like OKC had somewhat figured them out and was pretty comfortable over these last couple of games, and the momentum had decidedly shifted in OKC's favor. But I think clearly a big element of this on both sides has been the health and availability of the supporting cast, specifically the non-Wemby and Shai offensive threats. And I think on the San Antonio side, we've seen De'Aaron Fox came back. He has not been himself offensively. You've seen with the way he's landed on several of his drives to the rim, layup attempts, etc. Like he's just not, he's been moving a little gingerly and landing awkwardly. Did have a double-double tonight, but like has not looked exactly like De'Aaron Fox. Then I think Dylan Harper, after a great Game 1 performance, has not been the same player. Left Game 2 early, and then Game 3 and Game 4 has just not quite been the same. On the OKC side, I think we saw, like, despite AJ Mitchell not having a good series up to this point, his ball handling and usage and shot creation is still a weapon, especially in comparison to guys like Lou Dort or Kayson Wallace, Alex Caruso, even Jared McCain. Like if those guys have a magnet ball going, which they've had for most of the series, and of course McCain is, I think, one of the best shooters in the league, and Caruso's been having a great series shooting wise. Only took 1 shot tonight, but you just see the drop off offensively from a guy like an AJ Mitchell, even with his struggles against San Antonio's backcourt, to the rest of OKC supporting cast, to say nothing of missing Jalen Williams as well. So I think OKC missing 2 of their top 4 scorers has been something that eventually caught up to them, clearly caught up to them tonight to some degree. It led to, again, their worst offensive performance of the season. And it's going to be fascinating to see moving forward. Like if OKC just doesn't have AJ Mitchell and Jalen Williams, if they can score at a certain level. And I think they will shoot much better. Again, it was their worst 3-point shooting performance of the season low, tying in 3-point makes, season worst percentage. So you don't expect that to continue, especially as they head back to OKC for Game 5. But clearly OKC just did not have enough offensive advantage creation tonight. And with San Antonio making a big shift defensively in how they guarded Shai, I thought you saw they were able to stay home with their shooters and with some of the off-ball actions that they've been running to get guys like McCain open, or cheating off of Dort and Wallace and Caruso, and staying home with those guys a little bit more, still being aggressive in the gaps and shading over, but playing Shai a bit more one-on-one. And that was something that we saw going back to the last series the Lakers really struggled with, and they at times had to sell out against Shai, and then they were a bit more conservative with it in Game 4. And I thought that that was the Lakers' best performance of the series. And I think we saw that tonight as well with San Antonio. And this does feel like a turning point in the series potentially, where the key is just play Shai straight up, trust that Stephon Castle or Dylan Harper or whoever is matched up with him can dance with him, can stick with him, can rear view contest if he gets a step, doesn't fall for the pump fakes, and just contest and be disciplined defensively. And behind you, as long as you're not over helping, getting into rotation, you have the 7'7" alien who is also there constantly lurking with the secondary contests and just being a presence in and around the paint. So I thought it took maybe a little bit longer than San Antonio, or than it should have for San Antonio, to get to this point in terms of the defensive strategy. And I totally understand it with just how great Shai is and how great he was through the first couple of rounds of the playoffs. And I do wonder to some degree how much not having Jalen Williams or AJ Mitchell allows San Antonio to play this style of defense versus how they had been playing more so through the first 3 games. But they still sprinkled in some doubles here and there, especially when he was closer out to half court, 30 plus feet out. But anything lower than that, they were playing it far more straight up. And big shout out to Stephon Castle for his one-on-one defense against Shai. I think he's been one of the best defenders against Shai this season. The data backs that up, and he's just kind of made in a lab for that type of, I think really for any type of perimeter shot creator, where he's in that 6'4", 6'5" range. So he's not like giant for a perimeter guy, but I think he's in the sweet spot where he's big enough where you're not going to necessarily overpower him, but then you factor in the strength, the athleticism, the mindset, the physical tenacity with Stephon Castle, and that to me is what makes him such a special defender. And I think he's played great defense for the most part against Shai, not just this series, but going back to the regular season, watching him defend Luka, I thought he had some of the best performances and shifts against Luka I saw this season from any perimeter defender. So he's a special defender. He's only in year 2. I think he's going to be just thinking about where Steph Castle is going to be year 5, year 6. He's a really special player. And I've said it time and time again, he's one of my favorite players in the league to watch. He's struggled with the turnovers, had the 20 turnovers through the first couple games, but has cleaned that up here these last couple of games. Only had 1 turnover tonight, and is also getting the assignment of being the primary guy against the 2-time MVP. But they don't have to keep him on, where they could switch De'Aaron Fox, Devin Vassell, or Dylan Harper. And those guys have done a decent job as well. And so the Spurs, I think they should be trying to apply this strategy against Shai as much as they can moving forward. I'm sure OKC will counter, and the counter to some degree might just be getting AJ Mitchell and or J-Dub back. But they need to obviously be, I think they'll go through the film and they'll come up with some counters. I think there's ways to get Shai more off of the ball, on the move more, and leverage if they are going to be single covering him more and not shifting as much attention or as aggressive of attention, just getting him to different spots on the floor. Whereas if it's more so him attacking from the top of the arc, I think it becomes a little bit more predictable, a little bit easier to shade over, shift over, and zone up some of those backside reads. Whereas I think if you can move Shai around a bit, if you can get him going downhill and get the Spurs into rotation, that's where I think you start to break them down a bit and get into some of the crevices of the defense. I also think a big thing tonight, they still lost in Luke Kornet minutes, although part of that was in the fourth quarter. I don't know what the through 3 quarters was, but it felt like the Luke Kornet minutes were a little bit better tonight, and they survived better with Wemby off than on, or not than on, but better than they had earlier in the series, and it wasn't as destructive to not have Wemby on the floor. I think they also shifted his substitution pattern a little bit, where the Spurs have had these rough, especially these last couple of games, where they get off to the big start in game 3, get off to a big start again tonight. I think they're up 28-14 at one point in the in the first quarter. And I think they've been taking Wemby out for that middle portion of the quarter. And then they brought him back a little bit earlier tonight. And I thought that made a bit of a difference there, just because that stretch of like late first quarter into early second quarter, that's where OKC has gone on some runs so far in this series. And similar to game 3, like it was like they got off to the great start. They went to Kornet way too early. They went to Kornet at like the 7-minute mark in game 3, and that really shifted momentum towards OKC. So they didn't go back to that. But I also thought like they took Wemby out later than that, but a little bit earlier than normal, and then they brought him back in a little bit earlier. And I thought it gave them a little bit more runway there in that like late first, early second shift that they had been losing. But just hellacious effort defensively from San Antonio. Again, I said it at the top. I thought this was one of the best defensive performances I've seen all season. 21 stocks from them, and doing it against this offense, which has been OKC's been the best offense in the playoffs, and they had hit 11 plus threes in all 11 playoff games they had played up to this point. So they've just been rolling offensively and shooting the ball at a really high level. And this was sort of a reversion back to OKC of like last season, or even maybe earlier this season, but like where they'd have those dry spells from 3. They just could not score, could not make shots, and we haven't seen that version of them as much this season. I think that was more of a last season thing. But you take away AJ Mitchell and J-Dub, and I just think at some point they just don't have enough overall shot creation and offense when you're missing that much firepower. I do think there's still a gap between Mitchell and Dort or Wallace, Caruso, McCain. McCain just had a rough night tonight, 1 for 10 shooting, 0 for 5 on threes. I don't think that is going to happen again. But if you look at outside of Isaiah Hartenstein, no one got going. Shai was 6 for 15, got to the free throw line a few times, did have the 7 assists, but 4 turnovers, 19 points. Hartenstein got going early. He scored the first 8 points of the game for OKC, was the first Thunder player double figures. But otherwise, like everyone else, like Chet barely got to double figures. Kenrich Williams, Isaiah Joe were scoring in the fourth quarter when the game was already out of reach. They didn't even go back to Shai in the fourth quarter. He rested the entire fourth quarter, which was Mark Daigneault waving the white flag. We saw a little bit more Aaron Wiggins tonight. But I think from the OKC side, I think you partly flush this one just from a shooting perspective. Like no one could buy a shot. Jalen Williams 1 for 7 on threes. Isaiah Joe 2 for 7. Wiggins 0 for 4. McCain 0 for 5. That's not going to, I think, be applicable moving forward. I think those guys are all going to shoot better. But the turnovers, this was the first time San Antonio won the turnover battle. Just 22 assists to 17 turnovers for OKC. They have to be better with the decision making. And this was one of those games where it just snowballed early. They had a couple of stretches there, especially in that second quarter where they got it close. But then Wemby caps off that first half with the deepest shot of his career, a 43-foot buzzer beater, essentially a half-court shot to end the half and give San Antonio a bunch of momentum going into the second half. Then they continued things in the third, put it away, and I think OKC got it to like 18 or so at a couple points in the fourth, but the game was over, and San Antonio ended up having the biggest lead of the series by 25. But I thought like another big thing. So like defensively, I've talked about throughout the series, I think the chess match, the most interesting thing has been San Antonio's defense versus OKC's offense. But to flip that, looking at Wemby, to me, easily had his second best game of the series with 33, 8 and 5, 2 steals, 3 blocks, 11 for 22 shooting. Not the most efficient night for his standards, but what I really loved was the 22 shot attempts. I love the aggression from Wemby. No Spur took more than 13 shot attempts outside of Wemby. So just him being clearly the number one option and early getting it going with a couple of threes and taking some jumpers. But then I also think not just settling. I thought he settled a little bit too much in game 3. They did a better job of putting him in positions either as the roller with some lower screen and roll actions closer to the free throw line, or even some inverted actions, but elbow actions, a little bit of stack, and like just using him in different ways, having him bring the ball up the floor, initiating the offense. I just thought it was a nice counter of, we need to get this guy far more involved. We need to use him in different ways, different spots on the floor, and we need to get him closer to the basket. And you saw again a couple of lobs, a couple of the off the backboard putbacks from Wemby, several dunks in transition, and he just looked far more like himself and far more like the version of Wemby that we saw in game 1 and parts of game 2. But I would say, second half of game 2 plus game 3, he was not up to the level that the Spurs need. And this now, again, sets up a really interesting close to this series. I think this series has largely lived up to the hype. It's been unfortunate that we've had injuries on both sides where, again, Fox and Harper are clearly not themselves physically and have not been the offensive engines that you would want if you're San Antonio. And then for OKC, I mean, they have just not even had J-Dub going out game 2, AJ Mitchell being injured, not looking right, and then missing tonight. Just a couple big blows for them, and it's been a series of a season of big blows for OKC. They have sneakily been one of the most injured teams in the league, and you just wouldn't know it based on their dominance and their record. But I'm really excited for the final 3 games of this series. I will be covering Game 5 and Game 6. If there is a Game 7, I will do my best to cover it. I am going to be on a family trip with my wife and my son. We're going to be in New York, so I think technically that it's a Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, and it'll be like our first official day in New York. So we'll see. Maybe I do like a Sunday reaction post Game 7, but really excited. I mean, this series has been great. I think Games 1 and 2 were much better than Games 3 and 4, but it's been a pretty even series. Both teams have relatively close wins. Both teams have the blowout win, and now we got a best of 3. And especially if AJ Mitchell and J-Dub are not available, or maybe they miss one more game, come back game 6, I think this is going the distance. I picked OKC in 7. I still feel solid about that, but we've seen San Antonio's best punch. We saw it in game 1. We saw it tonight. They could land some haymakers on this team, and they could easily win the series. They could win the series in 6, and I would not be surprised. I think anything's on the table here among the 3 outcomes of OKC in 6, San Antonio in 6, or I guess the 4 outcomes of either one of the 2 teams in 6 or 7. Right now, I'm still sticking with my OKC in 7 prediction, but I think San Antonio is going to push them to the wire, and they could easily win this series. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Easy Peasy. Thank you for the super chat. Never wanted a team I don't normally root for to win so badly that Colin Fox nearly made me turn the game off. Happy I stuck with it. Yeah, I understand. OKC has become the villains of the league right now, and with the officiating on both sides of the ball, and Shai and Lou Dort and Isaiah Hartenstein with his antics against Wemby in game 2. It's just the Thunder hate has never been higher right now. It feels like it's hit a fever pitch, and everyone outside of Oklahoma City, or if you're just a Thunder fan somewhere else, is rooting for San Antonio. So I think to your point here, there's a lot of this right now of people that don't even like the Spurs are rooting for the Thunder just to see the Thunder lose, and we'll see, right? It's 2-2. It could easily go either way. I think health and if Fox or Harper can get back to being more like themselves, I think that is a potential swing factor. If one or both re-aggravate their injuries at some point and have to miss time, and then you're now back to the Jordan McLaughlin part of the rotation, or Keldon Johnson has still continued to struggle. It was a little bit better tonight in some regards, but 3 for 12, 0 for 4 on threes. He's just not been the player that the Spurs have needed. So those are some factors. But then on the OKC side, I mean, if they just don't have AJ Mitchell and J-Dub for as well as Alex Russo was arguably I wouldn't say their best, but I would say their second best player through the first 3 games. Had pretty quiet night tonight. Only took 1 shot. Only played 14 minutes. Struggled with foul trouble. McCain had the rough night. Chet was quiet for most of the night. And he's had overall for the series, I think, a pretty disappointing series, going up against what's on paper supposed to be one of his rivals or his primary rival. We'll see. I'm excited for the rest of the series. BT Kingsley, thank you for the super chat. Giannis to LA is real because Dame messed up Bucks books. And he follows up, how much money do LA have if they keep Rui on cap hold? And then follows up, if LA doesn't get Giannis, I think they pivot to AD. So I'll take each of these. Giannis to LA, I think is real in the sense of LA's interest. Now, Milwaukee's interest, I think that it remains TBD, and it's really going to depend on. I think the to me there are like two semi-plausible pathways to this happening. One, it's either Giannis decides either LA is like the place for him, or there's a list of 2 to 4 teams. LA's on that list, and the other offers just aren't competitive to the level that Milwaukee wants, and they're like, well, we don't want to take on some, like, they're not putting their best stuff on the table, they as in like the other teams. And okay, maybe the Lakers offer of, we get off the Giannis contract, we get cap flexibility, and we're getting their picks, and probably a little bit of salary thrown in there from LA, that maybe becomes more appealing than taking on some longer term money, depending on what the offers are. The second one would just be, in general, the offers being underwhelming, and it's like, maybe they don't want like a Tyler Hero, or I think if Evan Mobley's involved, that probably swings it. But maybe Houston's like, we're not giving you Amen Thompson, or we want to give you Jabari Smith and Reed Shepherd and picks or something like that. And like, if the offers are just below a certain level, that's where I could see it really becoming a thing. Otherwise, like, I mean, if for example, just to throw Houston out there, if Houston's like, here's Alperen Şengün, Amen Thompson, and 3 picks, like, the Lakers are going to lose that. Like, the Lakers can easily be outbid here. I don't think the Lakers have the strongest offer. I don't even know if the Lakers have a top 5 strongest offer among the actual suitors. And we still don't have full clarity on like how long that list is going to be. But the Lakers can offer Milwaukee a relative get out of jail free card in terms of, if you want to just get off this money because you're in cap hell and you don't want to continue to be in cap hell for the foreseeable future with this Miles Turner contract, which did not age well after the first year, the Dame stretch, and just some of their current financial situation and lack of picks, that is, the Lakers are the one team in the mix that can make that offer of, hey, like, we'll just take on Giannis. We maybe have to send out a little bit of salary to fully take him into our cap sheet, and we'll send you the picks, and we'll send you all the swaps that we can, and like, we'll make it work that way. Now, again, I don't think that's the best offer, and I think if a team comes with like 1 to 2 blue chip young players and 3 to 4 picks, basically on par or better than the Lakers picks, that's obviously a better offer that Milwaukee should take. But I think if Giannis exerts force to get himself to the Lakers, and or the other picks are just like underwhelming or kind of bad offers of like not the most enticing young talent and some contract stuff that you maybe don't want to take on, that's where the Lakers become a more appealing option. So I think they're going to be in the mix. I would not say they're the favorites. I don't even know if I'd put them in like the top 3, but I think they will be in the mix. But easily, like Houston with Thompson and Şengün, I think Cleveland, if they put Mobley on the table, although I know there was the report, or the recent report from The Athletic, that they don't want to put Mobley on the table, but there's obviously going to be some posturing going on right now. If it comes down to it, I would be curious to know if they actually would put Mobley on the table or not. Miami, I guess if you go, it really depends how they feel about Hero, but like you could go Hero where Jaquez and something else plus picks. Like, obviously in all these scenarios, I'm talking players, but like the assumption here is there's 3 to 4 picks at a minimum involved in all these. Yeah, I mean, then the Lakers also have potential offer with Austin Reeves if they really want to get aggressive with it. And there's the report from The Athletic that Luka does not want Austin involved in any trades. He wants Austin back, and including a potential star trade. He doesn't want Austin being sent out. But if it really comes to the point of like, do they need to put Austin on the table? I don't know what the Lakers would do, but I think they would at least have to consider that, right? So I don't think they should. I think it would be much better to have Luka, Austin, and Giannis, and still even potentially keep LeBron. But yeah, it's going to be the honest saga is not going away anytime soon. And then second one here. So if the Lakers keep Rui on the cap hold or keep Rui's cap hold, I mean, to be honest, there's really no reason they need to. I think it would make far more sense to either immediately re-sign Rui or to rescind his rights. And then if you have other priority moves you're making, then you could still circle back and sign Rui quickly. So I think it just does not. It only makes sense to keep a player on their cap hold if you're going to sign them to a larger contract. So that's why, for example, when we talk about Austin is his cap hold is $21 million. He's going to make more than $21 million on his next contract. So Austin, it makes sense to be like, we keep you at 21 and then we sign you to 30 plus, 35 plus, whatever it ends up being. Whereas Rui's cap hold is $28 million. Rui's not making $28 million. I think on the high side, he maybe makes 20. So you're keeping Rui at $8 million at a minimum above what he's likely going to make, at least if he's back in LA. So it doesn't really make sense to keep Rui on the cap hold. But I guess if you rescind, I'm going to keep it as keeping Austin and Jackson on their cap holds. But if you rescind LeBron, so I have it here with Luka, Vando, Ayton, Laravia, DK, Bronny, Adu, and the number 25 pick. That's about $87.6 million. So if you add in Rui's $27.4 million cap hold, that gets you to about $114 million. And that's with 9 players. And you'd have, and then if you have Austin and Jackson, though, that gets you to, let's see. So that 143-ish with Austin and Jackson on their cap holds. So you'd have about $21 million or so in, I guess actually you'd have about 24. You'd have close to 24 million in cap space, 23, 24, depending on where the numbers end up. So yeah, you would not have a lot of cap space. So it really would make far more sense to be like, Rui, here's 18 million, here's 20 million. Now you're shaving off 8 to 10 million, and now you have 33 to 35 million or so in cap space. So that would make far more sense than keeping Rui on the cap hold. And then if LA doesn't get Giannis, I think they pivot to AD. I think the big question with AD, other than, I mean, there's the health stuff. There's where's his relationship with the Lakers right now? I don't know, but I don't think it ended in the best way. I think that's a fair way to put it. He's making $58.5 million next season and then 62.8. That's just a monster number that I don't, like, if you told me AD is going to be healthy and play 70 plus games, sure, I think he could play up to that contract. I think it's very unlikely that, barring a healthy season that he's just not been able to put together now for a couple years in a row, that's on, it's more likely than not to be a negative value contract. It's again, when he's playing, I think he can live up to that $58-60 million price tag. But to actually hit that, you need to be playing, I think, at least in like 70 plus games. And it's possible he does, but history would suggest he's going to miss at least 17 to 20 games at a minimum, just based on his injury track record. So I think that would be a negative value contract. And on top of that, that would just take up, I mean, the Lakers couldn't even take in $58 million as things stand. You would have to not only rescind the rights to the projected free agents that you'd be rescinding the rights to, but you'd still have to clear, like right now, I have it with them, with the guys who are supposed to be on the roster, plus number 25 pick, plus Austin and Jackson cap holds, they're only at $49.2 million in cap space. So they need to shed an additional almost $10 million, which has to basically be Vando. Or maybe DA opts out and you could get off Dalton or Jake or something, but it's one of those two scenarios where DA opts out, which as of right now, I don't think is going to happen, or you have to find a way to dump Vando, which is going to require most likely a first round pick. So it depends. I mean, is Washington offering something? Are they attaching something to AD here? But for me, that salary is just really difficult to justify. I mean, I think a healthy AD would be a great fit. And I've talked about recently, or for those who follow me on socials, like talking about on Lakers Collective, like talking about the Giannis possibility and why I think Giannis is one of the few bigs who can actually match up with both Chet and Wemby and hold his own. AD is one of the other guys. Just AD, you can't guarantee he's going to be healthy or available, and we don't know how he's going to age with the injuries, with the increased weight over the last few years. Like, it's just he's a different player physically than he was in like the early 2020s. So if there was a buyout situation, if it was a reduced contract, that's a totally different story, and I would be open to it if I'm the Lakers. But at nearly $60 million plus another year at over 62, I think that's too much. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel channel, thank you for the super chat. Am I crazy, or is a Giannis cap space trade smart? Bucks may prefer Thero, Bronny, or no players, or is paying Hero Hawkes to stay mid. So this is the argument. Now, I think it depends on who's on the table, and if, for example, if Minnesota gets involved and Jaden McDaniels is on the table, then I'd rather have Jaden McDaniels than, well, of course, Thero or Bronny, but like, or then the cap space, right? If it's Thompson, Şengün, if it's Mobley, like, I don't think if OKC's offering Chet, I don't think it's going to get to that point, but who knows? I mean, if OKC loses this series, I wouldn't be surprised if they get a little bit more aggressive with their offseason and trying to improve the roster with the assets that they have. So, yeah, I mean, I think to your point, if it's like New York doesn't want to get involved, Houston isn't offering their best stuff, Cleveland really isn't putting Mobley on the table, and you start like checking off some of the teams that might be able to offer stuff that Milwaukee might want, you might get to a point where it's like, do you really want, like, Tyler Hero's not a franchise guy. I think he's at best a number 3, but probably more of a number 4. Hawkes is high level bench guy or like low end starter, but I mean, it's just draft capital, I guess. I mean, depends how many picks they're putting on the table. I think the most they could put this summer is 4. Golden State is another one that they'd be dumping the Jimmy contract and then offering their picks. But I think there is a scenario, however narrow, where the Lakers offer makes some sense. I think LA would probably try to dump Vando in that deal because they would have to create more cap space in some ways. And like one of the holdups could just be if Milwaukee's like, we refuse to take Vando, and the Lakers either need to trade Vando before the deal or trade Vando in the deal, and it's like a 3 or 4 team trade. The issue would be the team taking on Vando is going to want a first, but Milwaukee's going to be like, we need your 2 firsts, and like this year's, like, that's like the minimum here is like, yes, you're doing us a favor by dumping him, but we're taking the picks. Like that's like a non-negotiable. So they do, because of the limited picks and assets overall for the Lakers, they do, like, ideally you have either more second round picks or more first round picks where you could do something like dump Vando for a first or like 3 seconds or something like that. Then you go into the Giannis trade with 3 or 4 firsts and you make a very competitive offer. But the Lakers don't have the draft assets to do that. And so unless Ayton opts out and they get creative, they find some ways to, maybe at that point you could dump, if Ayton's off the table, you could dump Dalton and Jake or something like that. And it's not going to cost a lot. Maybe there's some team that sees those guys as Dalton just turned 25, Jake's 23. Maybe they see some value in those guys and you attach a swap or like a second round pick or something and you can get off those guys that way. Maybe that's the way this plays out, but I think more realistically, Ayton's opting in. You're going to have to get off the Vando contract. And I think that's a potential holdup here just because I think it's going to require an asset to get off Vando. But to your point, there is an argument to be made that if the offers are below a certain level, which as of right now, it seems like the Giannis market isn't the highest it's been, right? Like it's definitely cooled off. There is a pathway for LA to make the best offer. But realistically, I think if anybody comes correct with 1 to 2 high-level young players plus as many picks, if not more, than the Lakers, and probably, you know, or potentially better picks than the Lakers, that's where they outbid LA. BT Kingsley says, Braun, Luka, AR, Giannis, or AD stays in LA because Bronny. Yeah, I mean, so if the one thing here with LeBron potentially staying, if the Lakers do acquire Giannis, it would have to at that point be a minimum contract. They would not have, I mean, so that's another thing you have to factor in when we talk about Giannis is like the Lakers will have at that point, they'll be operating as a cap space team. So they'll have the room exception, which is $9.3 million. They could, you know, technically offer that to LeBron, but they would have that 9.3 for LeBron, Rui, Marcus, Luke, plus minimums. So one of those guys could stay for that. And you could argue, well, I would argue for LeBron, Rui, and Marcus, those are, you know, it's a clear pay cut. And below, like, I think all three of those guys, I mean, LeBron is self-explanatory, but like Rui and Marcus are double-digit million guys. And then Luke, that's kind of in the range for him. And I don't even know if you have to use that full room exception on him, but that would be like LeBron taking a massive pay cut of, we're already talking about like, does he want to take the 20 or 25 million or whatever pay cut? Now this is, you do have a better chance to win, but it's like, do you want to take a minimum pay cut or potentially the room exception, which is even less than the non-taxpayer that other teams can offer him. So that's its own conversation. And then AD, I don't know if AD would stay in LA just because of Bronny. I think it would be more LeBron, but also, I mean, if they're trading for AD, I mean, he's in LA at least for a couple of years, and they have to repair some relationships, and then they have to figure out his next contract. Because that's the other thing with AD is AD wants to get paid. AD wants a contract extension, and I think it's tough to justify paying him above like $35-40 million if he's not healthy. And so I would almost like, I would need to see a full season of health from him to consider like that type of extension. Juice 2K25, thank you for the super chat. You think the Lakers could get in on Donovan Mitchell if he becomes available this summer? I do. I mean, they could get in on just about any star that becomes available based on their cap flexibility and their picks. Now, if you're adding Donovan Mitchell, I think that is going to mean Austin is elsewhere. So that's just a factor here of, I think with Giannis, there is a clear pathway to retaining Austin and getting Giannis. With Austin, with Mitchell, it just doesn't really make sense. If you're going to have, it would not make sense to have Luka, Austin, and Mitchell. So at that point, whether Austin is going out in that trade, though, remember, Austin is a free agent. So any sign and trade situation he'd have to agree to, or maybe there's another team that wants Austin that you can first facilitate the sign and trade, get something back, and then put that, maybe there's a team that doesn't quite have the full cap space, but they send you a player and they send like a pick or something for Austin. Then you can either flip that player or keep that player and then flip the pick in a trade for Mitchell. But I think it would, in one form or fashion, mean that Austin's not back. So that's just something that you have to factor in. And then you are replacing him with Donovan Mitchell, who's obviously a better player, but also just thinking about the Giannis mold, you're more top heavy. This one, maybe you have a little bit more depth, but like, you're not necessarily just like opening up an additional salary slot here. You are like Mitchell's making, I don't know what Mitchell's making off the top of my head, but let's see here. Okay. So it's not crazy. He's making 50.1 next year. So the Lakers actually they'll only have to shed like DK really to get an opening there. And then they might not even have to trade DK, but because if they get off of Austin, whether that's a sign and trade out in this deal or another deal, that you're taking that 21 million off the cap sheet, and then you're replacing that with a empty roster charge, which is I think like $1.3 million. So yeah, I mean, it would be a different way. And then let's just say, so right now with Austin, it's about 49 million. You take the 21 out, that's about 70 million in cap space. You bring in Mitchell, you would have about 20 million left over. So you could still pay LeBron if you want to, and then have Luka, Mitchell, LeBron, or you'd have about 20 million left over to play with for Rui or Marcus or another free agent. Then you still have the room exception and then a bunch of minimums. So trading for Mitchell or Giannis is going to lead to a top heavy roster. If LeBron is willing to take a minimum contract, that does change that outlook a bit, right? With Giannis, that gives you like a big 4 almost. With Mitchell, that gives you a big 3, but some more flexibility to add other pieces. But sure, I think they would be in on it. Similar to Giannis, I don't think they'd be the favorites. And I think the fit with Mitchell and Luka is not as clean as the fit with Giannis, just because of, I want to see Mitchell's catch and shoot numbers. I'd be curious. Like Mitchell's obviously a higher usage player than even Austin. So he shot pretty well. 41% on catch and shoot threes in the regular season is the number I'm seeing here. So that's an elite number. Right now in the playoffs, he's shooting 24%. So that's obviously bad. Yeah, regular season, he shot 41% on 3.5 catch and shoot 3-point attempts per game. So that would likely go up to closer to like 5 or 6. So he'd be a higher volume 3-point shooter. But yeah, I mean, from a talent perspective, obviously the top of the roster gets better. And I mean, he was arguably a top 10 player this year. Peter, are you surprised with, I think for the super chat, are you surprised with the Knicks rolling? Yes and no. I picked the Knicks in 6. So I think it's looking like it's probably going to be a sweep, but at most 5. I think Cleveland blew the series in game 1. For those who watched, I did do a game 1 reaction, and I said, as many people were saying, like the series is probably over now. It's really tough to blow a 22-point lead with 7.5 minutes left in the 4th. I would say like the Knicks, it's going to be really fascinating to see how they match up with whoever comes out of the West, because on the one hand, like what they're doing is undeniable. They have put together this stretch of, I think it was the highest point differential in playoff history over a 9-game sample. And I think it's now extended to a 10-game sample. So since the middle part of that Atlanta series, they are absolutely rolling. At the same time, if you look at the teams they've beaten, and look, like I big proponent of you play who's in front of you. I don't really like to knock teams because you put yourself in the position, you win X amount of games in the regular season, you're seed X, and then you play the playoff path in front of you, right? So I don't want to hold it against the Knicks, but I think if we're looking at it through a critical and honest lens, it's like, okay, they played an Atlanta team, which did give them some problems to start the series, but I mean, they were solid, but they weren't like this crazy loaded team. Then they end up playing Philly, who upsets Boston, and Embiid is dealing with his stuff, and they end up sweeping Philly, but Embiid was not quite himself or even fully available for the entire series. And I think if Tatum doesn't go down going into game 7, I think Boston wins that series. But even let's just do the sliding doors moment of Tatum doesn't go down, Boston wins. I still think with how New York was playing, they would have beaten Boston, but that would not have been a sweep. And I don't even think, I think that would have been probably a 6-game series, maybe 7. I still would have picked New York to win the series in hindsight with like how they were playing, but I think it's a far more competitive series than a Philly series. Philly was like the ultimate high ceiling, high floor team. And we saw like their floor was pretty low. And that's been the case for several years now. Then in the conference finals, like Cleveland finally put it together and they ended up beating Detroit. But Cleveland is also, I would say, probably somewhere between like the 8th to 10th best team in the league right now. So if you look at the crop of, I don't want to take away from the Knicks, but like if you look at the crop of teams they're playing, like the jump up from Cleveland to San Antonio or Cleveland to OKC, I don't even think it's one tier. I think it's at least 2 tiers, if not like 3 tiers. And so I just think they're going to be an entirely different weight class. Like, you know, to me, it'd be like going from fighting someone like 210 pounds to fighting someone that's like 250 or 260 pounds. It's just, it's multiple weight classes up. And so like they're arguably playing the best basketball in the league right now. Like they've won, I mean, it's not even arguable at this point, but they've won 10 in a row. And I just also look at, I think it's going to look a lot different when they're playing OKC or San Antonio. And it's still, even within how well New York is playing, when I watch OKC and San Antonio play each other, even not at full strength, I think they're at a different level. So what I would say, I mean, Cleveland, this should be a 2-1 series. Cleveland should have won game 1. They blew it. They collapsed. They choked. That was the series. I think if they did win that game, maybe they get a second game. But I mean, this is shaping up like I think it's probably on paper should be like a 5-game series, and that might be how it plays out. But with how the Knicks are playing, I think they sweep. I just think, and I know you weren't asking about San Antonio or OKC. I just think I've already seen the takes of like, well, look at how well the Knicks are playing. They're going to go into the finals and win the title. I think it's different, right? To me, it's more reminiscent of like when some of those Cavs teams, like 2017, 2018, when they rolled through the playoffs at times, but you knew once they got to the finals, they were facing a behemoth in Golden State. And that's how I feel right now, where it's like, I just don't even think it's comparable. Like, I mean, I think OKC and San Antonio would also be up 3-0 right now on Cleveland, and it would look, potentially even worse, right? So I think the Knicks are going to make the finals, and it's going to be an awesome series, whether it's OKC or San Antonio. But I think they are in for an awakening in game 1 when they see the step up in competition. LA824, thank you for the super chat. How do you see Wemby evolving offensively? More Dirk-style perimeter game or Hakeem-style inside game? This is a really interesting question. I would say between these two archetypes, I would lean more Dirk. And I think we've seen elements of that with the pull-up shooting, the fadeaways, the step backs. Now he can do both. I think with Hakeem, I wonder I wonder how close, like Wemby is clearly going to get stronger and he's going to get better with dealing with physicality. And, but I also look at like KD, and I think there are some similarities with their body types in terms of just how thin and slender they are, right? And KD, like I think early in his career, there was a similar sentiment of, oh, well, like look at KD in like year 5, year 7, he's going to put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle. And like KD did put it, like he's definitely stronger now, or like stronger in the middle of his career than he was at Texas or like the first couple years, but he never quite filled out in the way that I think some people were projecting or predicting earlier in his career. And I do feel like with Wemby, it's going to be a similar thing where maybe he does put on 10 to 15 pounds, but he's still going to be a guy that with the high center of gravity and with just the slender frame, even if you put 10 to 15 pounds on him, you might not even notice it or like barely notice it. He's still going to be able to be pushed around a bit. And so I think having that, like if he could shoot the ball like Dirk, and we obviously see the shot making, and any given night he can shoot the ball like Dirk, but if he becomes a Dirk, like a Dirk KD level offensive piece that you move around the chessboard, with that height in his release point, it's just completely unguardable. And you see, like when his jumper's on, there's just nothing you can do. You can barely even contest it. You can't even put your hand in his face. Like he's rising up above you, and it's a matter of whether he makes it or not. Now, the Hakeem style inside game, I think the difference here, like with Hakeem, it was obviously a lot of footwork with the dream shake and just like arguably the best post moves, best post footwork of all time, at least for a big man. I think Wemby could add in some of those elements, but again, with the way that teams will defend him, either with an Isaiah Hartenstein type or like the Lou Dort Caruso type, like it's always like the MO against Wemby is always going to be physical with him, bump him, and he can, I think, get better in the post and get better with his footwork. But I still think there's just going to be an element of like, I just think there's like he's never going to be the full like Shaq in the post, right? And sometimes he looks like that, right? But Shaq was 350 pounds in his prime, so it's just totally different player or physical profiles, right? And just how you go about it. So I think though, like I think what he needs to me is a go-to move or like spot on the floor. And I think the crazy thing right now with him is like he's so talented and so gifted that I don't think he has a clear go-to move or go-to spot. Yet he still is dropping 30 plus and 40 plus against one of the best modern defenses, of all time. And so I think that's like the next evolution in his game is kind of raising his floor offensively and having some more. I mean, he does have some things that again, some of the step back stuff or some of the drop steps and with his length. I mean, if he drops steps from the free throw line, he's almost at the rim. But I think a little bit more polish to his offensive game, some better footwork, and some more pet actions, pet spots on the floor. I think that will take him to a different level offensively. But I would say between these two, I would lean more to the Dirk side. Now, I think there is some Giannis to his game, and that's where like Giannis was a similar. That Giannis is shorter, so it's a lower center of gravity relative to Wemby, and I think Giannis's frame clearly was able to handle putting on more size, more muscle. But I think there are some elements with Wemby where you could see maybe not quite going like full Giannis, but bulking up a little bit and also just being that threat in transition or sort of rip through threat from the perimeter and just putting his head down. Now, because of the stride, because of the foot, the shoe size and stuff, like I think some of those things are just limiting factors with him, and he's not going to quite look the same as Giannis. But I think I also thought Dirk had an underrated post game, and even within like his post ups could create separation with the fadeaways that he just was like peak Dirk was basically unguardable with how well-rounded his offensive game was. So between these two, I lean more Dirk, but I do see some KD. I see some Giannis. I do see some Hakeem too. Like I mean, I think the crazy thing with Wemby is he could do just about anything offensively, and we're seeing the passing has improved progressively, the decision making, the confidence. Like he's just leveling up consistently throughout these playoffs, throughout this season, and it's scary to think about where he's going to be in 2 to 3 years. Peter, thank you for the super chat. What do you think of John Ireland's idea of 2 years, $40 million for LeBron and assurance to develop Bronny? Duran now Supermax eligible. Does Detroit max him at 5 years, $287 million? I do not think Detroit maxes Duran. I think that would be, let's pull it up here. $287 million over 5 years. AAV of 57.4. No. I do not see that. I think he'd be fortunate to get 5 years, $200 million at this point. I don't know, especially when you think about like maybe the Lakers would go that high. I guess it depends on the market, right? If the Lakers or Chicago or Brooklyn wants to bid something like that, then Detroit has to, I think, outbid them and get to a certain level. But I mean, and that's, I'm talking like 87 million less than that over the same amount of years. Like I think you could argue, I think as of right now, he'd be lucky to get a $40 million AAV based on the the postseason that he just had. So by no means am I out on him, but it's just, this was such a stinker that I think he's probably closer to like a 35 AAV type guy that maybe you go up to 40 if there's some real competition for him. But 57 is, I think that would be ridiculous and a giant mistake for Detroit. In terms of the first thing, I mean, that's kind of along the lines of what I've thrown out. Like not a 2-year deal, and that's on LeBron if he would even want to commit to a 2-year deal. And of course he could retire, and then that money is off your cap sheet. I don't know if you could publicly frame it as like LeBron is re-signing because of an assurance to develop Bronny, but that would maybe be something privately you discuss. I don't know where that would fall in the CBA favors and whatnot, is like keep my son employed on the team. Like that's just not, I don't think that's a good look for anybody. If, you know, the Lakers publicly committing to that or LeBron publicly asking for that, like I think it should be more a meritocracy and just based on Bronny's development and where he's at. But I mean, that's sort of in line with what I've thought, like salary wise, but it just, the money dries up quickly. That's the thing I continue to say. Like if you go in with 49.2 and you pay LeBron 20, now you have 29 million to keep Rui, Marcus, and or add somebody. And that is just not that much to do it. I've been on the side of keeping LeBron, but it also depends like what he wants to decide, right? I think this whole thing with potentially deciding in like late July or August could be a wrench in the whole situation. I think he will decide before then, but taking that comment at face value, like that would be a bit of a swing factor for LA's cap sheet. Peter, thank you for the super chat. Do you think LA should offer Duran 4 years, 177? So that's the most, pretty sure that's the most Duran could be offered by a suitor. So thank you for putting the exact number here. So that's 44.3 million. I think that's too much. I would maybe be okay with like four. If I'm the Lakers, I don't think I'd want to go above 35, which I guess that's 140. Maybe you could talk me into 145, 150, but that's just that's like the caliber of center that is making that much is, I know Duran just made All-NBA and that's why he's super max eligible, but it was a regular season award. It was not a playoff award. And I mean, there were times they were just benching him for Isaiah Stewart or Paul Reed. That is when you're in, I think, a problematic place. And so I think that's too much. I would not want to pay him that much. If you could get him for, and to be honest, I don't think you would have to pay that much. Again, I think as of right now, I think he'd be fortunate to get 40 plus million. Chicago, thank you for the super chat. Mitch gave away games, double teaming Shai for no reason. Man-on-man defense, Spurs shut down OKC, Spurs in 6. I agree with this. And it's funny because people have been referencing, oh, well, like the Lakers gave the blueprint to how to shut down, for how to shut down Shai. And what I said in the Lakers series was that the Lakers are winning the battle, but they're losing the war. And ultimately, there was such a talent gap between the two teams, and especially with LA not having Luka, that it didn't matter how they defended Shai. But I think you saw in that game 4 when they defended Shai far more straight up, and like you're still aggressively shading over in the gaps. You're still mixing in some double teams. You're mixing in a little bit of zone. San Antonio hasn't done much of it, and neither did the Lakers. But like occasional possession here or there, you do need to mix it up, and you can't give them a steady diet of the same looks. But I think trusting your man-to-man defense and basically being like, hey, we're going to aggressively, if you drive to the left, we have a guy over there ready to help. If you drive to the right, same thing. And we're going to force you to be a contested pull-up mid-range shooter, which Shai's great at. And he has had some really big games in the playoffs doing that, including against the Spurs and against the Lakers. But I think that's how you have to defend it. Like tonight has to be the blueprint moving forward. Again, if he gets if he's turned supernova and he's got 45 and he's just killing you possession after possession, okay, start mixing in some doubles, start mixing in some more aggressive schemes. But I think we saw tonight was like the best of both worlds. I don't think it's going to be like this every single night where you shut down Shai and you shut down the supporting cast. But I think the issue has been you allow the supporting cast to get going. Then now you are having to panic rotate out to Jalen Williams, who the center who's in a rhythm, or Kason Wallace, or Caruso, or Jared McCain. And now your defense is leaking everywhere. And then, if you're over rotating out to those guys, now Shai has a crease in the defense. Now Shai is playing with confidence, playing with spacing, and he can attack you and get into a rhythm. Whereas I think if you condense the offense into more just Shai, try to do your thing one-on-one, and we'll live with Steph Castle, who's, in my opinion, one of the best perimeter defenders, best ISO defenders in the league. We'll live with that and have Wemby lurking and being ready to rotate over and contest and make, he had several shot attempts tonight that Wemby either affected or Shai made a couple over him, but it's Wemby's still there being a presence. You see Shai having to arc it a little bit higher. That needs to be the blueprint moving forward. So I agree. I mean, between the two, I would say it was more of an issue. Game 3, I just think the Thunder were the better team. After the post 15-0 start, the Thunder killed them. Game 2 was probably the one where if you're the Spurs, you say we should have been up 2-0 and now we should be up 3-1 if you want to make that case. But to me, 2-2 probably feels about right. But now it's on San Antonio to continue this game plan, to continue the same level of physicality, intensity, toughness. And then also we'll see what happens with J-Dub and AJ Mitchell. Because I think if those guys aren't there, OKC's down a lot of offensive weapons or a big share of their offensive hierarchy. And that's where San Antonio has an edge. All right, going to go about 5 more minutes here, then I will wrap. Rip Van Winkle says Duren is 22 and should get paid more than AR. I think he will get paid more than AR, but we'll see. Or they'll probably be in a similar neighborhood. But if I had to, I'd probably lean Duren in terms of who gets more money. Especially because you could argue that Brooklyn doesn't necessarily need a center, though you could, in a vacuum, you'd probably rather have Duren than Nick Claxton. Now, would you rather have Duren for double the money than Nick Claxton? That's a separate conversation. But Chicago needs a center. The Lakers need a center. So maybe between those two teams, Duren's market gets driven up. Connor Phillips, do you think the Knicks can win the finals, taking into account the rest and health advantage that they'll probably have? So this part, I don't really think the rest is that big of an advantage. It might be an advantage for game 1, but we've also seen, it depends on the team. It hasn't really, I would say it actually impacted the Knicks in game 1 of this series, where OKC, for example, we've seen their first couple of game 1s. I would say all 3 of their game 1s, OKC did not play their best basketball, and there was a rhythm element to it where some teams use the rest in a positive sense and they get refreshed and they're ready to go game 1. Some teams, it's all right, now we're out of rhythm. We need some time to get it back. And I think OKC has kind of been one of those teams. I think New York was one of those, game 1, they're down 22 with 7.5 minutes left and they have the incredible comeback, but through the first 3.5 quarters, the Knicks did not play well. And they missed a ton of shots. And I think the process was probably a little bit better than the results. But the Knicks were not playing their best basketball, nowhere near what they've played in game 2 and game 3 since then. So I don't think that I still would heavily favor San Antonio or OKC. What I will say is to this point, maybe they could steal game 1. Because the other thing is they're not going to have home court. So that's the Knicks have had home court in all 3 series. They will not have home court in the finals. So I do think they've had a great home court, right? MSG is rocking. It's one of the best home environments in the league, one of the best home crowds. They've traveled well on the road, but I think it is going to be different not having home court in the finals. I would still give either one of the teams that comes out a notable advantage. However, to the health point, there is something here of if J-Dub And it's, I think, pretty realistic that J-Dub is just like out the rest of the playoffs, or pretty compromised, or there's still if he does return, there's a high level of re-injury risk. AJ Mitchell having, I think he has a calf injury, if I'm not mistaken, or some lower extremity soft tissue injury. That's probably a decent chance of a re-injury risk. And then on the San Antonio side, maybe they get Dylan Harper, De'Aaron Fox where they need to go. But De'Aaron Fox is playing like, if anyone's played on a sprained ankle before, you could play through it, but you are a little ginger with your ankles, and like there's always you step on someone's foot the wrong way, and all of a sudden you're out 2 to 4 weeks with the injury. So I guess the specific scenario here for the Knicks winning it for me would be they steal game 1 against either one of these teams, and then like OKC beats San Antonio, but they're decimated with no J-Dub, no AJ Mitchell. They really missed them against the Knicks, and there's like a war of attrition element. Or the San Antonio side, Harper, Fox never quite get back to being who they were. And I guess if it's like a compromise to some degree, OKC or San Antonio, I can see it, but I still think I'm just imagining like all the guys both teams can throw at Jalen Brunson. And I think like it's just totally different going from like Max Strus and Dean Wade and Dennis Schroeder to Steph Castle and Dylan Harper and even Vassell and Fox. I think have done a really good job against OKC's perimeter guys, or going up against Wallace and Caruso and Dort. And like, it's just a different, you're going from average to like slightly above average defenders to like all defense level guys. And I think Brunson is great enough where Brunson will still put up his numbers and still have like big performances, but I could see it being more volume based than efficiency based against either one of those two teams. And I also think San Antonio's done a much better job. Like go back to the NBA Cup championship, Mitchell Robinson had the 10 offensive rebounds, dominated them. Like I don't think they get physically overwhelmed as much as they used to maybe earlier in the season. Same thing. I mean, OKC I think is maybe a little bit more susceptible to that, but yeah, I mean, I still, as of right now, I would pick either one of those teams in 5. Maybe with how well the Knicks are playing, it goes to 6, but I would still pick the West. Eric asks about Connect being in the doghouse all season. To keep it short and sweet, I think the thing with Dalton is, and I just want to make sure I'm being accurate. I'm pretty sure he shot 31. No, he shot 34%. Okay, so that's why I wanted to be accurate. Shot 34% on threes this year. I think it really comes down to like Dalton's out there for offense and shooting. And I don't think he did either one of those two things at a high enough level to offset the defensive deficiency plus the overall processing, like basketball IQ element. I think he is, I feel bad picking on Dalton sometimes and like kind of rehashing some of the things, but like the guy has forgotten plays that have been drawn up for him coming out of timeouts, and like the amount of plays that he forgets and the amount of just sometimes like not seeing the game at a certain level or processing or decision making. Like it's one thing if he's like a 40% 3-point shooter or he's like lighting it up, but he's not consistently been the instant offense guy that they want outside of like garbage time. And he's not been shooting the ball at a level that the Lakers would need him to look past those things. So it's like, if he's technically a below average shooter and like every few games he might pop for a big off, like he regressed offensively in basically every category. You look at across the board, lower field goal percentage, lower 3-point percentage. I was actually slightly more efficient on twos, but got to the free throw line less, shot worse on free throws, fewer. And I'm not even looking at like per game. I'm doing per possession and per 36 minutes here, but like lower points, higher turnovers, lower assists, just across the board. Like he was objectively better in year 1 than year 2. So you also factor in he's 25, just turned 25. It's like he just projects as a guy that like it's kind of like a dart throw. Like you could throw him in and maybe he gets hot occasionally, but like he's also going to be targeted and get backdoored and give up offensive rebounds and not be a force in transition defensively. And just like, he just checks so few boxes, I think, where it's like outside of maybe this guy's going to get hot and like maybe he has a good shooting night. You need more than just that, right? Like if you're going to play a guy that, if you want to bank on a guy's offense and shooting, you bank on Rui, you bank on Luke. Dalton is not on. Those guys are above 40%. Those guys are in the mid 40s% 3-point shooters. Dalton is not close to that. And then on top of that, I think he's even worse. He's worse defensively than either one of those guys, and just also does not see the game at the level that the Lakers need him to. So I would say that's the short and sweet of it. Matt Avoyer, thank you for the question here. Do you think the Lakers can really compete for a title in the next 2 years? I do. I would say 2 years, like the second year to me, 2027, 28 is more realistic than 2026, 27. I think it's going to be really difficult for the Lakers to, I think there are offseason outcomes in which the Lakers enter next season as like the third best team in the league. But I think right now the gap between the top two, specifically OKC and San Antonio, and the rest of the league is a pretty decent gap. Like it does, I'm not the first person to make this comparison, but it does kind of feel like the mid 2010s when it was like Golden State and Cleveland and everybody else, and it didn't really matter. You could even win more games than them in the regular season, or you could even be up on a series against them, and you still felt like it was inevitable. Golden State and Cleveland were the two best teams in the league. They were going to meet in the finals, and Golden State, won more of those battles than not. But like, that's kind of how this feels, and we're just getting started with this. Like OKC is in, I guess, year 3 of being a contender, but potentially going back to back. We'll see. San Antonio's in year 1. But this San Antonio, I think most teams nowadays have like 3 to 5 year cycles. So I guess if you're being pessimistic with OKC, you'd give them 2 more years. But they could reshuffle the roster, and they have the draft assets and the cap flexibility in the future to get off some big money and like make some other moves. So I think OKC is going to be around for the next 4 to 5 years rather than like 2. And then San Antonio, I mean, their 3 best players are all in their early 20s. So it's like San Antonio could have at least a 5-year run here, and depending on health for Wemby, I think specifically, and like just how they manage things. So I think for the Lakers, it's going to be really difficult to build a roster that's on par with San Antonio and OKC this year. But if you give them this summer, next trade deadline, and another summer, I think across those 3 cycles, they can get there going into the 2027-28 season. But they have to nail like at least 2 of those 3 cycles and like really make some moves to improve the roster. So it's a tall task. And to be clear, it's not just a tall task for the Lakers. I think it's a tall task for the rest of the league to catch up to OKC and San Antonio, who have built these like super teams with really young players, and they're deep, they're athletic, they're great on both sides of the ball. Like it's just everyone's trying to play catch up. But for the Lakers specifically, to the question, I think I would lean more on 2027-28 than 2026-27. Danica says, then by your logic, Jovan, shouldn't Luka walk? No, because, I mean, look, I don't like telling people, like, players have their prerogative and they are free to do whatever they want. I would say that if Luka goes to, I mean, the one argument you can make, which has been an argument you could make for a lot of stars over the past 20 plus years, has been like, go east and you have a better chance to come out of the conference. So sure, if you want to say like, Luka, go to Miami, do you maybe have a better chance of coming out of the east than you do of the west? Like, I guess you could potentially make that case, but I think this would be an issue regardless of the situation that he's in. I guess maybe theoretically, if Dallas had not made the trade, like Dallas was set up to maybe retool some things around him and have some young pieces and whatever. But I think it's going to, like, if we're talking like purely competitively, I think it would be an issue almost anywhere he went, just in comparison to, because regardless of how you want to rank the top players in the league, like I think Wemby has clearly ascended to the level of he's on that, Jokic, Shai, Luka conversation. Like I think they're all kind of in the same plane right now. And so OKC and San Antonio like have the guy that's on the level of Luka still, but then they also have, the Castle and the Harper and the Fox and the Champagne and the Johnson. And OKC is just a super team of role players and guys, combination of like specialists and defensive athletes. And it's just, those teams are super deep and talented and flexible and versatile. So I think if Luka's starting over somewhere else, he's going to kind of be in a similar position. And there are very few teams that if you're trading for Luka, you're decimating your roster to fit in his salary. And then if you're signing him, theoretically, again, though, you have lost some pieces off your cap sheet to sign him. So is there maybe a situation that he could walk into that would be more competitive than the Lakers? Maybe. I don't know off the top of my head, but I don't think that. I think the interesting thing is like, how do the Lakers move this summer? And like, just what do they do? What's their approach? And how aggressive are they trading the picks? How aggressive are they with the contracts with their free agents, or just like are they running it back? Before I wrap here, like I am doing an off-season questions episode tomorrow on my show. So I will be touching on some of this stuff and like my big questions of the off-season and going into each one of them. And one of them is about Luka and just like what he wants. One of them is about like the Lakers and how they want to approach this offseason. So I will be touching on a lot of this tomorrow. But I wouldn't say that by my logic, Luka should walk, because then you could apply that to like, so should Cade Cunningham leave Detroit? Should Donovan Mitchell leave Cleveland? Should Brunson leave New York? Like you could go star by star and be like, all right, well, you're not as good as OKC or San Antonio, so you should just leave or give up. Like I don't subscribe to that. I think you have to go for it. I just think it's more so like there's a lot of pressure on the Lakers to nail this offseason and to nail the next year. And if they don't, then that opens up some interesting conversations next summer. Perry asks, if Ayton opts in, should you do Vando and Ayton straight up for Pat Williams from Chicago? I just want to double check if he's expiring or not. I would say no. I would rather just have Ayton as... I think Ayton's a better player than Patrick Williams. Yeah, no. Patrick Williams has got 3 more years left on that contract. No, you'd be saving $2 million, and I think Ayton's just straight up better than Pat Williams. And even Pat's, I would say better than Vando, but that's a bad contract. $18 million a year for 3 more years. All right. Any final questions here before I wrap? Eric said, Knicks have a puncher's chance. Their starting 5 is connected. This is also a part of it where, look, Landry Shametson playing well. Deuce McBride is one of the best backup guards in the league. Mitchell Robinson, they have some pieces off the bench, but I think OKC is the deepest team in the league, so they're going to have a bench advantage over everybody. San Antonio, if Harper can get right, if Keldon Johnson can have a better series, they also have a pretty strong bench, at least like top end of the bench. So I think that's another adjustment where the Knicks starting 5, to your point, I think can compete with just about any lineup in the league and can compete with OKC or San Antonio's starting group. But I think as you start to factor in the benches and the overall depth, I do give an edge to OKC and San Antonio. Choco Thunder says he's taking the Knicks to win it this year. And he says Brunson will spank SGA. That's assuming OKC even gets out. We'll see who comes out. Eric, do we gamble on a Trey Murphy or Jay McDaniels all-in trade and hope they continue to ascend? So I would say between these two, I don't think Jaden McDaniels is going to be available for some sort of all-in move. Like, you have to think about if you're the Timberwolves, like you have made the conference finals in 2 of the past 3 years. You've advanced out of the first round 3 straight years. You are not on the OKC San Antonio level, but you are on the precipice of you can make a case that a full strength Minnesota is obviously Ant was not quite himself after the injury in the Denver series, and then no Dante DiVincenzo after the torn Achilles. Like, you could make a case that Minnesota is arguably the third best team in the West, like based on that core being together for a certain amount of time, based on their pedigree of back-to-back conference finals going back into the season. Like, Minnesota is clearly a team that's better in the playoffs than the regular season. I think that's like a fact now. That is cemented, that however good you think Minnesota is, as long as they're like reasonably healthy, and that's far from a guarantee now with some of the big injuries they've had, but at least on paper, like if Minnesota is like a 48-50 team in the regular season, they play like a 55 or 57 win team in the playoffs. Like they are a playoff rising group. And so trading Jaden McDaniels for a bunch, if the Lakers say here's 3 picks for Jaden McDaniels, like unless you're using those picks to go get Giannis, which you could, but that's far from a guarantee. Unless you're going to get Giannis, it doesn't really make sense for Minnesota to just give up Jaden McDaniels for picks. Like, you want to be competing. And if anything, like if I'm Minnesota, the 2 guys I would want to keep no matter what in a Giannis trade, of course, Ant, but I would also want to keep Jaden McDaniels. It's like, I'd want to get off Randall, Gobert, and Milwaukee's not going to want those guys. But if you could somehow have Giannis, Jaden, and Ant, that 2, 3, 4, or however you want to slot them rotation, lineup wise, I mean, that's as like good as it gets from like a physicality, athleticism, length standpoint in the league. And maybe somehow had like Gobert, Giannis, and McDaniels as a front court. Like, that's just ginormous. So I don't think McDaniels is going to be available for that. Is he available for maybe a Giannis trade? I think that's a different conversation, but that would not, in my opinion, factor in the Lakers, into that. Trey Murphy's a different one. I would be open to a Trey Murphy trade for 2 firsts for sure. 3, I'm a little bit more borderline. I know that they want 3 or 4. That's been the asking price for a couple years now on Trey Murphy. So I think the Lakers would have to give up. That's why, like, when I see some of these hypothetical trades, or they're like, could the Lakers give up 3 picks and get Trey Murphy and Herb Jones? Like, I would be stunned if the Lakers could pull that off. The asking price, I've said it before, like the asking price combined for those 2 is like 6 first-round picks, or it's been 2 for Herb Jones, 4 for Trey Murphy. You're not getting them for 3. I think at a minimum you can maybe get them for 4, but I don't see a scenario in which you get those 2 guys for 3 first-round picks. So Trey Murphy's an interesting one. Now, the thing with Trey it's partly dependent on what happens with Austin and what happens with LeBron, because I think Trey profiles, like you look at his size and his physical tools, the athleticism, like on paper, he looks like a guy that should be an elite defender, but he's just not quite, he hasn't quite put it together. So I think like he's closer to like an average-ish defender who can use his length and athleticism to some degree to make an impact, but it just isn't quite the, like, if you look at the height, the wingspan, the athleticism, like you expect a better defender than he actually is. And that's one of the limitations, where if you have like LeBron, Trey, and Austin and Luka, lights out offensively, and Trey's an elite shooter. He's a great offensive player. Like, that would be a great fit next to those 3. But when we get to the defensive part, it's like he's not a stopper, and I think there's a real limitation there. So I would say it depends on, like, I guess if you lose Austin or LeBron, I'm a little bit more open to going more all in for like an offensive minded scorer / piece like Trey Murphy. Jaden would be great. Jaden, I just don't think is available even for 3 picks. Zvass asks, I've not heard about the Pacers looking for defensive wing depth for cheap. It would make some sense for them based on their current roster. Heard Laravia's near the top of the list. Guess they believe a shot will come around. Wonder who they'd trade for him. Yeah, if we pull up the Pacers cap sheet here, there's Ben Shepherd. I don't think they would do Jarris Walker. I think he's too important for them. And then you get into Yeah, I mean, Jay Huff, like I don't, maybe Ben Shepherd, but then I don't even know if that's, do you really want Ben Shepherd like more than Jake? I don't know. I'm still on the side of Jake's shot coming around. Now, I think the gap between where it's currently at and where it probably needs to be is still pretty big. So I could see him still ending up like a 34, 35% 3-point shooter, and that being solid, especially with the defense where he's like a solid ninth man. But I think the aspiration, no pun intended, for him to be like this high 30s or 40-ish% medium volume 3-point shooter, I haven't entirely written it off, but I think we saw in like a slightly larger, more consistent role, there's just too much variance with his shot right now. So I think he will improve. Like, I would be pretty surprised if this is the player or the shooter that Jake is the rest of his career. And even within how up and down this season was, like, there were some real highs. I think he ended it on such a low that people forget some of the highs early in the season. But going from like where it's currently at to where you probably want it to be or need it to be is a pretty big jump that I think would take at least a couple seasons. And I don't know if the Lakers can afford to just be that patient and wait on that, but we'll see. And final two here. Dos Portos asks, do you think this offseason OKC moves J-Dub? I think OKC is in a really interesting spot. I think this is more so if they lose, whether they lose to San Antonio or they lose to the Knicks. It becomes easier to justify making a bigger move if you lose. If you win, we've almost never seen... We saw Denver lose some bench guys after they won the 2023 title. The Lakers lost some pieces from the 2020 team. Like, teams will lose some pieces, but you rarely see a team just outright like trade a big piece after winning the championship. So I think them moving off of J-Dub or Chet, like, I wouldn't want to move off Chet, but if Chet just like gets dominated or has a really rough series against Wemby, like I think at that point, I'm not saying trading for, but like I think Giannis is the one where it just becomes interesting. Of you're already kind of in this stretch here where you're a bona fide contender, and would you rather just have Giannis than Chet? Now, Chet's much younger, he's a better shooter. I would say at this point he's a better defender, arguably the second best defender in the league. So there's these elements to it that, not saying you go out and get Giannis, but I think it does potentially open up the door for a J-Dub or Chet trade, depending on how they feel about those two. I think we are seeing, like, we saw it earlier in the series, like, for as great as AJ Mitchell looked against the Lakers, it's a totally different beast. I mean, that would be kind of my analog here with the whole Knicks conversation. And like, look at how comfortable AJ Mitchell looked like Jalen Brunson against the Lakers. And then he goes into the Spurs series. And even before the injury, he was not playing well and he was getting locked up. And it's like, just the level of athleticism and perimeter. And of course, Jalen Brunson's a much better player than AJ Mitchell, but like, there are some similarities in their game, in their play style. And I'm more so making the point of, like, you see going from like the Lakers defense to the Spurs defense, how different AJ Mitchell looks. I don't think there'll be that big of a drop off for Brunson, but like, I think going from Max Strus and Dean Wade to Stephon Castle or to Kason Wallace, it's just objectively like a massive difference between that caliber of defender. So I say all this to say, I think it depends on if they win or lose. I think if they win, they probably run it back and maybe make some tweaks to the bench. And if they need to cut some costs, you could get off Isaiah Joe, you could get off Aaron Wiggins. You got some cheaper pieces you can move. If they lose, I think all bets are off outside of course, like Shai, and maybe they make some bigger moves. And then there's another one, from Eric. If we lose AR and Braun, we need a lead point guard as our second scoring option to Luka. This is a thing I will continue to hammer, that I would say this more so applies to AR than LeBron. But obviously if you lose both, it really applies. But my one thing with the people who want Austin gone, the people who want Austin to sign elsewhere or to be signed and traded. I think they are underestimating the importance of that role and that archetype on a Luka team. And I don't want to debate or litigate AR versus the Dallas version of Brunson or AR versus Dallas Kyrie, but just that general player of like a 20 plus per night backcourt scoring threat, not even like threat, like pretty consistent nightly guy, which Brunson became, especially as the season progressed and the playoffs happened that year and he really popped. Kyrie has been, and Austin developed into this year, like that plus the playmaking, the catch and shoot ability for those guys in the regular season and playoffs. For Austin in the regular season, obviously needs to be better in the playoffs, though did start to shoot better in the OKC series. Like that player archetype is so pivotal next to Luka that if you don't believe Austin can be that, that's fine if that's your prerogative. But the Lakers need to replace that position, and it's not like a Trey Murphy or it's not a Quentin Grimes or even an Ayo DeSumo. Like those guys are, I mean, the latter two are just not good enough for that position. And Trey Murphy is just a different archetype altogether. He's nowhere near the ball handler or passer or playmaker that Austin or Kyrie or Dallas Jalen Brunson were. So point being is like, if you move Austin for a different piece, if you move Austin for a center, you move Austin for a wing, cool. You plug that hole. Maybe it's a better fitting piece, at least on the defensive side. You still need to go get that offensive player. Like, because some of the roster constructions I see where people will throw out some of these like starting groups, I'm like, outside of Luka, you have like one dude who could dribble in the starting group and like one dude who's an above average passer. Like that's not the Luka mold. I think people sometimes focus too much on like, yes, you need the rim running center, you need the wings. You also need the high level guard who can drop 20 points and 5 assists every single night. And if you don't have that guy, I think that's where the mold starts to get a little bit shaky. So if you are losing one of these guys, but I think, yeah, I guess either one of these guys, I do think you need to replace the playmaking, but specifically Austin as that high usage backcourt guy next to Luka, whereas LeBron was more lower usage when all three were together and more playing out of the post. You need a guy who can assume that usage. And if the Lakers don't replace that, I think that's a pretty big hole in the roster that I think some people are overlooking when they talk about the roster construction. And then final one here, super chat from Sean. Thank you for the super chat. Rui Vanderbilt on first for Wiggins worthwhile. The OKC Spurs series shows the value of two-way wings. Man, SGA getting locked up. I mean, I've been on board for or with trading for Wiggins for like a year and a half. So you don't have to sell me on a Wiggins trade. I just think he's like with Rui specifically, right? Because it's basically Wiggins for Rui. It's like outside of 3-point shooting and this very specific like 1 to 2 dribble pull up that Rui is one of the best, top 3, top 5 in the league at. Wiggins is just better defender, better rebounder, higher motor overall, more athletic, better shot creator for himself. I think better cutter. And so like, I just think Wiggins checks far more box, like is a far more versatile and well-rounded player. Definitely better ball handler passer than Rui. So, I mean, I would not say this would be like my plan A, but if you strike out with the Peyton Watson, you can't get one of the restricted free agent centers. Some guys don't shake loose on the trade market. Wiggins would probably be more of like a plan C for me, plan C, plan D, but I'd be open to that. Like I would not mind Andrew Wiggins, and I think he's just an overall better player than Rui, but also fits more of what the Lakers need from that fourth spot next to LeBron, Austin, and Luka. I mean, he had a great season. Like I think I would argue where like Wiggins' value was a year ago compared to now, I think his value is even higher. Yeah, I think he had a pretty, probably his best season, I would say, like post winning the title that year with Golden State, he was an all-star. They won the title. Like since that season, I think this was his best season post that. But with all that said, I'm going to wrap here. I will be back tomorrow. I'm going to be doing the herd in the morning And then I'll be recording 5 big offseason questions for the Lakers and posting that. Might be on CNN tomorrow night as well. So busy day content-wise, and then back Tuesday for Lakers Collective. Appreciate you guys for rocking with me for an hour and a half. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. I will be back tomorrow, and I will talk to you all then. Enjoy your Memorial Day.